Alexander Crawford had everything. Manhattan penthouse, private jets, $3.5 billion within reach, until he called the wrong waitress stupid. The word cracked across Luke Bernardine Elite's dining room like a whip. Cameras recording as the billionaire CEO humiliated Naomi Brooks for barely brushing his shoulder, never knowing he'd just lit the fuse on his own destruction. In 72 hours, the video would have 50 million views, his investors would walk, his board would revolt, and the black waitress he'd dismissed as nobody would stand in the ruins of his empire with her dignity intact, proving that in the age of social media, cruelty travels at the speed of light, but consequences travel even faster. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The lunch rush at Luke Bernardine Elite was in full swing, and the prestigious Manhattan restaurant hummed with the quiet intensity of power and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in crisp white linens, where New York's elite conducted million-dollar deals between courses of foie gras and aged wine. The air carried whispers of mergers, acquisitions, and the kind of casual wealth that could change lives with a single signature. Naomi Brooks moved through this world like a shadow, balancing a silver tray loaded with champagne flutes as she navigated between tables. At 28, she had perfected the art of being simultaneously present and invisible, available when needed, unseen when not. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun that emphasized her high cheekbones and warm brown eyes. Those eyes, though tired from working double shifts for the past 3 months, maintained a professional sparkle that her customers appreciated. Table 12 needs their appetizers. Marcus, another server, whispered as he passed her near the kitchen doors. And Naomi? Harrison just called in sick. Can you cover his section too? Naomi's shoulders tensed for just a moment before she nodded. Of course. That meant another 14-hour day, but she couldn't afford to say no. Not when her younger brother Terrence was counting on her to help with his Columbia tuition. Not when her own dreams of finishing her business degree at Baruch College depended on every dollar she could save. The textbooks hidden in her locker reminded her that this was temporary, a means to an end, not the end itself. She delivered the champagne to Table 7, a group of Wall Street executives celebrating a successful quarter, and accepted their barely acknowledged thanks with grace. As she turned, she caught sight of herself in one of the restaurant's gilt-framed mirrors. For a second, she saw not a waitress, but the future businesswoman she was working to become, someone who would sit at these tables rather than serve them. "Naomi, you're glowing today," said Mrs. Whitman, one of the regular patrons, an elderly woman who lunched there every Thursday. "How's that brother of yours doing at Columbia?" "He's doing wonderfully. Thank you for asking," Naomi replied, her smile genuine this time. "Pre-med, 2nd year. He just made the dean's list. You must be so proud. And you? Still taking those business classes?" Before Naomi could answer, the restaurant's atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, a collective straightening of spines, a pause in conversations, the way the air changes when someone important enters a room. Through the etched glass doors walked Alexander Crawford, and with him came the unmistakable aura of absolute power. At 42, Alexander Crawford was everything the business magazines said he was and more. His salt and pepper hair was styled with military precision, his charcoal suit clearly custom-tailored to his athletic frame. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never heard the word no and meant it. Behind him trailed his entourage, 2 assistants frantically checking phones, a bodyguard who scanned the room with professional paranoia, and most importantly, 2 figures Naomi didn't recognize, but who carried themselves with equal authority. "That's Chun Industries." Marcus materialized beside her, his voice low. "The older gentleman is Mr. James Chun himself, and the woman is Sophia Alvarez from Alvarez Global. They're here about the Singapore expansion, $3.5 billion deal, if the rumors are true." Naomi watched as the maitre d' practically genuflected, leading the group to the restaurant's most prestigious table, a corner booth that offered both privacy and the ability to see and be seen. Her stomach sank as she realized it was in Harrison's section. Her section now. You've got this. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. Just remember, Crawford likes his water with exactly 3 ice cubes, no lemon. Naomi took a deep breath, grabbed her order pad, and approached the table with measured steps. As she drew closer, she could hear Alexander's voice, smooth and commanding, painting pictures of profit margins and market domination. Mr. Chen listened with the stillness of a man who had heard many such pitches, while Ms. Alvarez took notes in a leather-bound journal. Good afternoon, Naomi began, her voice steady and professional. Welcome to Lou Bernardine Elite. My name is Naomi, and I'll be taking care of you today. May I start you with some water? Alexander didn't look at her. His hand waved dismissively while he continued talking. The Singapore expansion isn't just about market penetration. It's about establishing dominance before the Europeans even realize the opportunity exists. Naomi poured water carefully, 3 ice cubes for Crawford, as Marcus had warned. She moved around the table with practiced efficiency, noting Ms. Alvarez's slight smile of acknowledgement and Mr. Chen's polite nod. At least some people still recognized her humanity. The wine list, Alexander snapped suddenly, still not looking at her. The Chateau Margaux, 2015. 3 bottles. Excellent choice, sir. I'll have that brought out immediately. She retreated to place the order, her hands steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her. There was something about Alexander Crawford that set her on edge, not just his wealth or power, but the way he weaponized them, wielded them like a blade to keep everyone at a careful distance. 20 minutes later, she returned with the wine, the bottles cradled carefully in her arms. The conversation at the table had intensified. Alexander was leaning forward, his hands gesturing emphatically as he described projected returns that made even Mr. Chen's eyebrows rise slightly. The beautiful thing about this deal, Alexander was saying, is that we're not asking you to trust projections. We're asking you to trust power. My ability to make things happen regardless of obstacles. Naomi began the wine service, starting with Ms. Alvarez as etiquette demanded. The woman murmured a quiet, "Thank you," that Alexander talked over. As Naomi moved around to serve Mr. Chen, she had to lean slightly across the table to reach his glass. The weight of the bottles made her balance precarious for just a moment. That's when it happened. As she pulled back from pouring Mr. Chen's wine, her elbow barely grazed Alexander's shoulder. The lightest touch, hardly more than a whisper of contact. But Alexander reacted as if she'd struck him. His hand shot out, not quite pushing her, but making a sharp gesture of disgust that caused her to stumble slightly. The wine bottle wobbled in her hands, and though not a drop spilled, the moment stretched taut with tension. Are you stupid? The words cracked across the restaurant like a whip. Alexander's voice, previously smooth and controlled, turned sharp and ugly. Can't you perform the simplest task without bumping into people? This is what happens when they lower their standards. The restaurant fell silent. Forks paused midway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the establishment turned to their table, to the tall black woman standing frozen with a wine bottle in her hands and the billionaire whose face had twisted with contempt. Naomi felt heat rise from her chest to her face, a burning humiliation that threatened to consume her. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced them still. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, some sympathetic, others merely curious, all witnessing her degradation. I apologize, sir, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Apologize? Alexander laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. An apology doesn't fix incompetence. This is a business meeting worth billions, and you're stumbling around like some amateur who wandered in off the street. Stupid girl. The word stupid hit her like a physical blow. She'd been called many things in her life, had faced subtle and not so subtle racism in restaurants across the city, but something about the casual cruelty of it, the public nature of the humiliation, made her want to disappear entirely. Mr. Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Alexander, perhaps. No, James. Alexander cut him off, still staring at Naomi with cold eyes. This is exactly the problem with this city. They'll hire anyone these days, no standards, no training. And then they wonder why service is declining everywhere. Ms. Alvarez set down her wine glass with a deliberate clink. "The wine is excellent," she said, looking directly at Naomi. "Thank you for your service." The kindness in her voice almost broke Naomi's composure. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and finished pouring Alexander's wine with hands that she willed not to shake. As she set the bottle in the ice bucket, she caught sight of other servers hovering nearby, torn between wanting to help and fear of drawing Alexander's ire. "I'll send someone else to take your order," Naomi said, proud that her voice remained steady. "You'll finish what you started," Alexander commanded. "Unless you're too stupid to remember how to write? Or do they skip that part of your training too?" A soft gasp came from a nearby table. Mrs. Whitman, Naomi noticed, had her hand pressed to her chest, her face a mask of indignation. At another table, a young man in a suit, barely out of law school by the look of him, had his phone out, though he seemed uncertain what to do with it. Naomi straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and pulled out her order pad. "What can I get for you today?" Alexander rattled off his order without looking at her, his tone suggesting she was barely worth the effort of speech. Mr. Chan ordered quietly, almost apologetically. Ms. Alvarez, when her turn came, looked Naomi directly in the eye. "I'll have the salmon," she said clearly. "And truly, you're doing fine." The wine service was perfect. Alexander snorted. "Don't encourage mediocrity, Sophia. That's how standards slip." As Naomi wrote down the orders, she became hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of her pen on paper, the soft classical music that had resumed playing, the whispered conversation starting up around them. She could feel Alexander's contempt radiating off him like heat, could sense Mr. Chin's discomfort and Ms. Alvarez's careful observation. "I'll have these orders to the kitchen immediately," she said, tucking her pad away. "Try not to trip on your way there," Alexander called after her, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. His entourage laughed, the nervous, obligatory laughter of people who knew their paychecks depended on it. Naomi walked to the kitchen with measured steps, her head high despite the burning in her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where he could see. She'd learned long ago that dignity was sometimes the only currency people like her had in places like this. Behind her, she heard Ms. Alvarez's voice, low but distinct. "That was unnecessary, Alexander." "That was a lesson," Alexander replied. "In business and in life, you have to maintain standards. Let one thing slide, and everything collapses." She needed to learn that. "I think," Mr. Chin said slowly, "that she already knows more about maintaining standards than you might imagine." The kitchen of Luke Bernardine Elite was a world away from the dining room's refined elegance, all stainless steel and controlled chaos. The moment Naomi pushed through the swinging doors, the dam broke. "That bastard," hissed Carla, another waitress who'd been with the restaurant for 5 years. "I heard everything." The whole kitchen heard everything. Marcus was already there, his face tight with anger. "I should go out there. Someone should say something. And lose your job?" Naomi shook her head, forcing her voice to remain steady. "He's Alexander Crawford. He owns half of Manhattan. We're nothing to him." "You're not nothing," Jerome, one of the line cooks, called out from his station. "That man's nothing but money in an expensive suit. You've got something he'll never have, class." Naomi managed a weak smile, but inside, the word kept echoing. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She'd worked so hard to never be seen that way, had pushed herself through community college courses while working full-time, had taught herself to speak with the precise diction that wouldn't mark her as being from the Bronx. And with one word, Alexander Crawford had reduced her to nothing. "I need a minute," she said, heading for the staff restroom. Once inside, with the door locked behind her, Naomi let herself collapse against the cool tile wall. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down her face as her body shook with the effort of keeping silent. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the flow, but the humiliation was too fresh, too raw. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Terrence. "Hey sis, crushed my organic chem exam. Thanks for the late-night quiz session. You're the best." The message broke something inside her. Here she was, being called stupid by a man who'd inherited his first million, while she helped her brother understand complex chemical structures after 14-hour shifts. The irony was bitter enough to laugh at, if she hadn't been crying so hard. A soft knock on the door interrupted her breakdown. "Naomi? It's me, Carla." Naomi splashed cold water on her face, trying to erase the evidence of her tears. When she opened the door, Carla immediately pulled her into a hug. "Don't you dare let him break you," Carla whispered fiercely. "I've seen you handle the worst customers with grace. I've seen you study your textbooks during every break, memorizing business theories while we're all scrolling through our phones. You're going to be somebody, Naomi, somebody important. And he's just going to be another rich asshole who peaked at cruelty." "It's not just what he said," Naomi admitted, her voice rough. "It's that everyone heard it. Everyone saw it. I can't go back out there." "Yes, you can. And you will. With your head high." Carla pulled back, fixing Naomi's collar with maternal care. "You know what the difference is between you and him? He humiliates people because he's weak. You're going to walk back out there because you're strong." Meanwhile, in the dining room, the atmosphere at Alexander's table had shifted perceptibly. The initial awkwardness had given way to something more complex. Alexander had returned to his pitch, his voice as smooth as ever, but something had changed in the dynamic. "The third quarter projections are conservative," he was saying, sliding a tablet across to Mr. Chun. "We're estimating 20% growth, but honestly, I expect 30. Mr. Chun studied the numbers, but his expression remained neutral. "These are impressive figures, Alexander. But I'm curious about something else. Your employee turnover rate, it seems quite high." Alexander waved dismissively. "Cost of doing business. We demand excellence. Not everyone can meet our standards." "I see," Ms. Alvarez interjected, making another note in her journal. "And how do you typically handle conflict with employees or partners who might struggle to meet these standards?" "Simple. You cut them loose." Alexander's smile was sharp. "No room for weakness in business, Sophia. You know that." Ms. Alvarez's pen stopped moving. "I find that interesting. In my experience, the strongest leaders are those who elevate others, not those who—" She paused, choosing her words carefully, tear them down. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's a nice philosophy for a TED Talk, but this is real business. The Singapore expansion requires someone who isn't afraid to be ruthless." "Ruthless with competitors, certainly," Mr. Chun said quietly. "But with one's own team? With service staff who are simply doing their jobs? That speaks to character, Alexander." "Character doesn't move markets," Alexander shot back, his voice taking on an edge. "Results do, and my results speak for themselves." At a table 3 rows over, the young law intern, David Hartley, sat with his study group, his phone still in his hand. He'd managed to capture the entire incident on video. Not intentionally at first. He'd been recording his friend's birthday toast when Alexander's voice had cut through everything. Now he sat with 30 seconds of crystal-clear footage showing one of New York's most powerful men berating a waitress for barely touching his shoulder. "You should post it," his friend Whitney urged. "That was horrible." "I don't know," David hesitated. "He's Alexander Crawford. His lawyers could destroy me. Or you could send it anonymously to that investor group chat you're part of," another friend suggested. "Let the market decide what they think of his character." Back in the kitchen, Naomi had composed herself. She looked at the orders in her hand. Alexander's $40 appetizer, Mr. Chin's modest soup, Ms. Alvarez's simply prepared salmon. She could do this. She'd served worse people, though perhaps none quite so publicly cruel. "Orders up for table 12, the head chef called out. Naomi loaded the plates onto her tray with practiced precision. Marcus appeared at her elbow. "I'll go with you. Salmon training or something." "No," Naomi said firmly. "He wants to see me broken. I won't give him that satisfaction." She pushed through the doors, tray balanced perfectly, and made her way across the dining room. She could feel eyes on her, some sympathetic, others curious to see if there would be another scene. Mrs. Whitman caught her eye and gave her a small, encouraging nod. "Your appetizers," Naomi announced, her voice professional and steady. She served each dish with the same grace she'd shown before, refusing to let her hands shake, refusing to lower her eyes. Alexander didn't acknowledge her, but Ms. Alvarez did. "This looks wonderful, thank you." As Naomi turned to leave, she heard Alexander mutter to his companions, "See, they could be trained with proper motivation." The word stung, but not as much as before, because this time she caught the look that passed between Mr. Chun and Ms. Alvarez, a look that suggested Alexander Crawford had just failed a test he didn't even know he was taking. The rest of the service proceeded without incident. Naomi brought their main courses, refilled their wine, and maintained her professionalism throughout. Alexander ignored her completely, which was almost worse than the initial confrontation. To him, she had ceased to exist entirely. But others noticed. The restaurant owner, Richard Beaumont, had emerged from his office, drawn by whispers from his staff. He watched Naomi work, saw the straight line of her back, the steady grace of her movements despite what had happened. He'd always thought of her as just another server, replaceable, interchangeable. Now he saw something else, strength under pressure that many of his wealthy patrons could never match. As the lunch wound down, Alexander called for the check with an imperious wave. Naomi brought it promptly, setting the leather folder beside him without a word. "The service got better toward the end," he announced to his companions, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Sometimes you need to establish boundaries early. It's like training a dog. Firm correction at the first sign of problems." This time, the silence that followed was different. It wasn't shocked, it was cold. Ms. Alvarez closed her journal with a decisive snap. Mr. Chun checked his watch. "We should go," Mr. Chun said. "We have much to discuss." "The contracts are ready for signing," Alexander said, missing the shift in tone. "My lawyers can have everything prepared by tomorrow." "We'll be in touch," Ms. Alvarez said, standing. She looked at Naomi, who had come to clear their plates. The salmon was perfectly prepared. "Please give my compliments to the chef." After they left, Naomi stood in the empty space they'd occupied, stacking plates methodically. The business card Ms. Alvarez had left beneath her plate caught her eye. On the back, written in elegant script, were two words, "Stay strong." In the bathroom mirror an hour later, as Naomi touched up her makeup during her break, she stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her was tired, yes, and hurt, certainly, but not broken, not stupid. One day, she whispered to her reflection, thinking of her textbooks, her dreams, her brother's faith in her. "One day, I'll be sitting at those tables, and I'll remember exactly how it feels to serve them." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Your dignity in the face of his disrespect was noticed by more people than you know. The world is watching, even when you think you're invisible." She deleted the message, unsure what to make of it, but something in her chest loosened slightly. She thought of Ms. Alvarez's card, of Mr. Chin's uncomfortable shifting, of Mrs. Whitman's sympathetic gaze. Maybe Alexander Crawford had won this round, but the game, whatever game this was, wasn't over. That evening, in a private conference room at the Four Seasons, Mr. Chun and Ms. Alvarez sat across from each other, their legal teams dismissed for the moment. $3.5 billion, Ms. Alvarez said, spreading the contracts before them. "That's a lot of money to entrust to a man who can't control his temper with a waitress." "I've been thinking the same thing," Mr. Chun admitted. "If he treats service staff with such disdain, how will he treat our employees in Singapore? Our partners? What happens when a deal doesn't go his way?" "He showed us who he is today," Ms. Alvarez said. "The question is whether we're going to believe him." "There's something else." Mr. Chun pulled out his phone. "My assistant just sent me this. It's already circulating in private investor groups." He showed her the video, 30 seconds of Alexander Crawford calling a young black woman stupid for barely grazing his shoulder. The audio was crystal clear, the contempt unmistakable. "Well," Ms. Alvarez said after a long pause, "I think our decision just became much simpler." Back at the restaurant, as the dinner shift began, Naomi moved through her duties with mechanical precision. The story of what had happened had spread through the entire staff. Some offered sympathies, Others shared their own stories of customer cruelty. But it was Carla who said what Naomi needed to hear most. "You know what the best revenge is?" Carla asked as they prepared for the evening rush. "Success. That man thinks you're nothing? Prove him wrong. Not for him. He doesn't matter. For you." Naomi nodded, thinking of her business textbooks, her dreams of entrepreneurship, the future she was building one double shift at a time. Alexander Crawford had tried to make her small today. But tomorrow? Tomorrow was still unwritten. And across town, in his penthouse office, Alexander Crawford reviewed the Singapore contracts one more time, completely confident that his $3.5 billion deal was secure. After all, he was Alexander Crawford. He always got what he wanted. He had no idea that in a few short days, a waitress he'd called stupid would become the catalyst for the complete destruction of everything he'd built. The aftermath of the restaurant incident rippled through New York's financial district like blood and water, drawing sharks from every direction. Naomi's apartment in the Bronx was a far cry from the gleaming restaurants where she spent her days. The two-bedroom unit she shared with Terrence was clean but worn, the walls lined with motivational quotes she printed from the internet and framed herself. At 11 p.m., she finally walked through the door, her feet aching from the 14-hour shift. Terrence was at the kitchen table, medical textbooks spread before him, a cup of coffee growing cold at his elbow. He looked up the moment she entered, and she knew immediately that he knew. "It's already online," he said quietly. "Someone posted it in the Columbia Student Forum." "Naomi, I'm so sorry." She set down her bag slowly, buying time to compose herself. "What are they saying?" "That Alexander Crawford is exactly what everyone suspected. A bully with a bank account." Terrence stood, crossing to her. "But more importantly, they're saying you handled it with more grace than he deserved." Naomi sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "He called me stupid, Terry, in front of everyone. In front of investors, other customers, everyone. And you know what?" Terrence sat beside her, taking her hand. "You proved him wrong just by how you responded. You didn't sink to his level. You didn't give him the reaction he wanted. That takes intelligence, emotional intelligence, which that man clearly lacks." She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his conviction. "The restaurant owner apologized to me privately. Said he wished he could have done something, but couldn't afford to lose Crawford's business." "The coward's excuse," Terrence said with unusual venom. "But forget him. What matters is you. Are you okay?" Naomi considered the question. Was she okay? The humiliation still burned, but underneath it, something else was stirring. Not quite anger, not quite determination, something harder to name. "I will be," she said finally. "I have to be." Meanwhile, in a gleaming conference room 40 stories above Wall Street, an emergency meeting was taking place. The video, now dubbed Crawford's Meltdown, in certain circles, played on a loop on the main screen. 30,000 views in 6 hours, reported James Patterson, head of Patterson Equity. And that's just on the private investor platforms. If this goes fully public, when corrected Sarah Kingston from Kingston Capital, when it goes public, these things always do. The men and women gathered around the table represented collectively over $200 billion in managed assets. They'd all dealt with Alexander Crawford. Some had profited from his ruthlessness. Others had been burned by it. None were surprised by what they saw on the screen. "The question," said Patterson, "is what this means for the Singapore deal. Chen and Alvarez haven't signed yet," Kingston noted. "My sources say they're reconsidering." "Over this." Thomas Bradley scoffed. He was rude to a waitress. "Since when do we cancel billion-dollar deals over bad manners?" "Since bad manners in public suggest worse behavior in private," Kingston shot back. "How many former employees have NDAs with Crawford Industries? How many lawsuits have been quietly settled? This isn't about one waitress. It's about a pattern." The room fell silent as they contemplated this truth. They all knew Alexander's reputation. They'd all chosen to overlook it when the profits were good. But times were changing. Social media had made secret keeping harder. The court of public opinion now had a say in private equity. "I'm pulling our joint venture," Patterson announced suddenly. "Not worth the risk." "James, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. My daughter's at Columbia. She saw this video before I did. Asked me how I could do business with someone like that. What do I tell her? That profits matter more than principles. One by one, phones began buzzing around the table. The video was spreading, jumping from private platforms to public ones. Twitter was picking it up. Reddit had a thread. It was only a matter of time before mainstream media noticed. Back at the restaurant, Richard Beaumont sat in his office, staring at his computer screen. The restaurant's social media accounts were being flooded with comments. Some praised them for employing Naomi. Others condemned them for allowing the incident to happen. Reservations for tomorrow were already showing cancellations. Not many, but enough to notice. He picked up his phone and dialed Naomi's number. Naomi? It's Richard Beaumont. I know it's late, but I wanted to check in. How are you holding up? There was a pause before she answered. I'm managing, Mr. Beaumont. I'll be at work tomorrow. Don't worry. That's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to say I'm sorry. I should have intervened. I should have stood up for you. You have a business to run, Naomi said, her voice neutral. I understand. No, you don't understand. I've been thinking about this all evening. You've worked here for 2 years. You've never been late, never called in sick without serious cause. You handled difficult customers with grace. You're pursuing a business degree while supporting your brother. You're exactly the kind of person we should be protecting, not throwing to the wolves. Naomi was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. Then, what are you saying, Mr. Beaumont? I'm saying things are going to change, starting with a promotion. You're being moved to assistant manager, effective immediately. The position comes with a salary, benefits, and set hours that will allow you to attend your classes. Mr. Beaumont, if this is guilt, it's not guilt. It's recognition. Recognition I should have given long ago. You've been managing situations and people since you got here. It's time the title and compensation match the work. After they hung up, Naomi sat in the darkness of her bedroom, processing this unexpected turn. Through the thin walls, she could hear Terrence on the phone, his voice animated. She caught fragments, viral and justice and about time. Her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Brooks, this is Sophia Alvarez. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from the restaurant. I wanted you to know that your composure today influenced a very important decision. Sometimes the smallest moments reveal the greatest truths. Stay strong. Naomi read the message 3 times before deleting it, unsure what to make of it, but feeling something shift in her chest. She pulled out her journal, a habit from college, and began to write. Dignity, she wrote, is not about never being knocked down. It's about how you stand back up. Today, a man with everything tried to make me feel like nothing. He failed, not because I fought back, but because I refused to break. There is power and grace under pressure. There is strength in silence. Tomorrow, he'll still be wealthy, but I'll still be unbroken. The next morning brought consequences Alexander Crawford hadn't anticipated. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on his office door with unusual hesitation. What? He barked, not looking up from his monitors. Sir, there's a situation developing. The video from yesterday's lunch. What video? Jennifer pulled up her tablet, showing him the footage. Alexander watched himself berate Naomi, his face impassive. So, someone recorded a necessary correction. Delete it. It's beyond that, sir. It's on multiple platforms. The view count is approaching 200,000. Business Insider has picked it up. The Wall Street Journal is requesting comment. Alexander finally looked up, his eyes cold. Get legal on it. Cease and desist orders for anyone sharing it. Threaten lawsuits. Legal says that might make it worse. The Streisand effect. I don't care about effects. I care about control. Handle it. But control was already slipping through his fingers. In Singapore, the board of Chun Industries was having their own emergency meeting. The video played on repeat as board members discussed implications. This is who we're trusting with our expansion, asked one member. A man who publicly humiliates service workers? The Singapore market won't respond well to this, another added. Respect for all levels of workers is crucial there. If he treats American service staff this way, how will he treat our local partners? James Chun himself sat quietly, remembering the dignity on Naomi's face, the grace with which she'd continued serving them despite the humiliation. He thought of his own daughter, working her way through business school, taking whatever job she could find. What if it had been her? "I've decided," he announced. "We're pulling out. James, the contracts haven't been signed. We're under no obligation. And frankly, after what I witnessed, I'm relieved we waited." Back in New York, Alexander's day was deteriorating rapidly. His phone rang constantly, board members asking questions, partners expressing concern, journalists seeking comments. He ignored them all, confident it would blow over. These things always did. Money had a way of making problems disappear. What he didn't know was that 3 floors below, his own employees were watching the video, sharing it, discussing it in hushed tones. Years of resentment were bubbling to the surface. Anonymous complaints to HR suddenly had a focal point. The toxic culture they'd all endured in silence now had a perfect example. "Remember when he made Sarah cry in a board meeting?" whispered one analyst to another. "Or when he threw that contract at David's head? We could say something now. People might actually listen." The whispers grew louder, spreading through the building like wildfire. By lunch, productivity had noticeably declined. By afternoon, HR had received 17 formal complaints, all referencing the video as evidence of a hostile work environment. Naomi, meanwhile, was at the restaurant, adjusting to her sudden promotion. Richard Beaumont had been true to his word. She now had an office, small but private, and responsibilities that went beyond carrying trays. The other servers treated her with a mixture of respect and curiosity, unsure how to navigate this shift in dynamics. "You deserve this," Carla said, helping her move her things into the office. "Should have happened ages ago." "I keep thinking he's going to take it back," Naomi admitted, "that this is just guilt management. Maybe it started that way. But you know what? Take it anyway. Use it. Build on it. That's what that Crawford would do, except you'll do it without stepping on people." Her phone buzzed. Terrence had sent a link to a Business Insider article. Crawford Industries under fire after CEO's public outburst against service worker. She didn't read it. She had work to do. Real work. Work that mattered. 3 days after the restaurant incident, Alexander Crawford stood in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, surveying his kingdom. Crystal chandeliers cast diamonds of light across the room, where 200 of New York's most powerful individuals mingled, champagne flutes in hand, waiting for the ceremonial signing of what he still believed would be his greatest triumph. The space had been transformed into a monument to corporate excess. Ice sculptures shaped like the Crawford Industries logo dominated each corner. A string quartet played softly in the background. Every detail had been orchestrated to project one message. Alexander Crawford was untouchable. "Sir," Jennifer appeared at his elbow, her face tight with worry. "Mr. Chun and Ms. Alvarez have arrived, but they're requesting a private word before the ceremony." "Tell them we'll talk after the signing," Alexander said, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "Everything's been arranged. The contracts are ready. The photographers are in position. They're insisting, sir." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he maintained his smile for the crowd. 5 minutes. Conference room B. As he made his way through the crowd, accepting congratulations for a deal not yet signed, he noticed something peculiar. Conversations seemed to pause as he passed. Smiles seemed forced. The energy in the room fell off, like a piano slightly out of tune. In the kitchen, hidden from the glamorous crowd, Naomi Brooks was experiencing her own surreal moment. Luke Bernardine Elite had been hired to cater the event, and despite her recent promotion, Richard Beaumont had asked her to oversee the service personally. "I need someone I trust running this," he'd said. "And frankly, after everything, I think you deserve to see how this plays out." Now she stood in her assistant manager's attire, still service industry, but elevated, directing a team of 15 servers. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was at Alexander Crawford's triumph, invisible again, but somehow essential. "Naomi," Marcus approached, his face pale. "You need to know, Crawford's here. I mean, obviously he's here, but he's been asking about the catering. He might come back here." She straightened her shoulders. "Let him come. I'm doing my job, just like before. This is different, and you know it. The video has 5 million views now. Everyone knows who you are. No, Naomi Kediktiv. Everyone knows who he is. I'm just the mirror that showed them." In conference room B, Alexander faced James Chun and Sofia Alvarez across a mahogany table. Their lawyers flanked them, faces unreadable. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Alexander said, his patience already fraying. "The contracts are ready. The photographers are waiting." "What's this about?" "We've reconsidered," Chun said simply. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Alexander laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Cold feet? The numbers are solid. The projections are conservative. You won't find a better opportunity." "It's not about the numbers," Alvarez said, her voice steady. "It's about leadership. It's about trust. It's about the kind of partner we want for this expansion. This is about that waitress." Alexander's voice turned cold. "You're seriously going to walk away from $3.5 billion because I corrected incompetent service?" "Corrected?" Chin's eyebrows rose. "Is that what you call public humiliation? Is that how you correct your employees? Your partners? She's not my employee. She's nobody." "And that," Alvarez interrupted, "is exactly the problem. You see people as either useful or nobody. That's not leadership. That's tyranny." Alexander stood, his face flushing. "You're making a mistake. When this deal happens without you, and it will, you'll regret this moment." "The only thing we'd regret," Chin said, also standing, "is enabling someone who treats human dignity as optional." They left Alexander standing there, his hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Not over something so trivial, so insignificant. He stormed back toward the ballroom, his mind already spinning damage control. He'd announce a delay, blame regulatory issues, anything but the truth. As he passed through the kitchen doors, a shortcut he'd memorized, he stopped dead. There she was, Naomi Brooks, not serving this time, but directing, clipboard in hand, wearing the unmistakable outfit of management. Their eyes met across the stainless steel expanse. For a moment, neither moved. The kitchen staff seemed to hold their breath, waiting. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of contempt. "I see you've been promoted. Diversity hire, I assume." "Merit-based, actually," Naomi replied, her voice steady. "Something you might not recognize." The boldness of her response shocked him. The waitress who'd whispered apologies 3 days ago was gone. In her place stood someone who'd found her voice. "Careful." Alexander stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You might have gotten lucky once, but I could end your career with one phone call." "You could try," Naomi said, not backing down. "But I think you have bigger problems right now. Your investors are leaving, aren't they? That's why you're here, in the kitchen, try to intimidate someone you called nobody. Because the real nobody is starting to show. You think you've won something?" Alexander's mask finally cracked, revealing the fury beneath. "You think this changes anything? I am Alexander Crawford. I've destroyed bigger obstacles than you." "I'm not an obstacle," Naomi said quietly. "I'm a mirror, and you don't like what you see." Before he could respond, the kitchen doors burst open. Jennifer rushed in, her face white with panic. "Sir, you need to come immediately. The Times is here. The Journal. They're all asking about the deal, about Chun and Alvarez leaving." Alexander turned without another word, but Naomi caught his arm. He looked down at her hand, then at her face, his expression murderous. "A word of advice," she said, releasing him. "Try not to embarrass yourself again." He yanked away and stormed out, leaving Naomi standing with her team, all of whom looked at her with a mixture of awe and concern. "Back to work," she said calmly. "We have a service to run." In the ballroom, chaos was brewing beneath the veneer of elegance. Word had spread that Chun and Alvarez had left. Reporters, who were supposed to be covering a triumph, smelled blood in the water. Alexander took the stage, his smile forced but present. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "Thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion." "Mr. Crawford," a reporter called out, "can you comment on reports that Chin Industries and Alvarez Global have withdrawn from the deal?" "Negotiations and deals of this magnitude are always complex," Alexander said smoothly. "We're exploring all options to ensure the best outcome for our shareholders." Is it true they withdrew because of the viral video showing you berating a service worker? The room fell silent. Every eye fixed on Alexander. In the back, someone held up a phone recording. That incident has been wildly mischaracterized, Alexander said, his control slipping. We live in a world where everyone's a victim, where every correction is seen as an attack. I maintain high standards. If that offends some people. So you don't apologize for calling her stupid? Another reporter pressed. I apologize for nothing. She made an error. I addressed it. The fact that this has become some social media circus shows everything wrong with our society. We've become soft, prioritizing feelings over excellence. The murmur that ran through the crowd was not sympathetic. Several board members exchanged alarmed glances. This was not the controlled response they'd prepared. From her position by the service entrance, Naomi watched Alexander's self-destruct. She felt no satisfaction, only a strange hollowness. This man who'd seemed so powerful, so untouchable, was revealing himself to be exactly what she'd said. Nothing but money in an expensive suit. Ms. Brooks. She turned to find Sofia Alvarez standing beside her. Ms. Alvarez, I didn't expect. I wanted to see you before I left. To thank you. For what? I just served wine. No, you showed us character. His and yours. The contrast was instructive. Alvarez handed her a business card. When you finish that business degree, call me. We're always looking for people who can maintain grace under pressure. As Alvarez walked away, Naomi looked at the card, then back at the stage where Alexander was growing more agitated, his responses to reporters becoming increasingly hostile. Mr. Crawford, do you think your leadership style might be a liability? My leadership style built an empire worth billions. What you built? What she built? Nothing. You're all nothing, pretending your opinions matter, pretending that recording someone on your phone makes you important. I am Alexander Crawford. I matter. I make decisions that affect thousands of jobs, millions of dollars. And you want to crucify me because I hurt some waitress's feelings? The words echoed through the ballroom. Someone gasped. Others pulled out their phones, recording what was clearly becoming a historic meltdown. She's not just some waitress, a voice called from the crowd. It was David Hartley, the law intern who'd recorded the original video. Her name is Naomi Brooks. She's working 2 jobs to support her brother through medical school while getting her own degree. She's exactly the kind of person American success stories are supposed to be about. And you called her stupid for accidentally brushing your shoulder. Alexander's face contorted with rage. Get out. All of you get out. This is my event, my moment. Not anymore, said a calm voice from the side of the stage. Thomas Bradley, chairman of Crawford Industries Board, stepped forward. Alexander, I think it's time you step down. For the good of the company. You can't. We can. We will. Effective immediately. You're being placed on administrative leave pending a full board review. The ballroom erupted. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. Alexander stood frozen on the stage, his empire crumbling in real time, broadcast to the world. In the kitchen, Naomi's team had pulled up the live stream on someone's phone. They watched in stunned silence as Alexander Crawford, the man who'd humiliated her 3 days ago, was escorted from his own celebration. You did this, Marcus said quietly. You brought down Alexander Crawford. No, Naomi said, watching the screen. He did this to himself. I just refused to be his victim. As the ballroom descended into chaos, as reporters scrambled for quotes and board members huddled in crisis management, Naomi quietly returned to her work. There were still desserts to serve, still a job to complete. The difference was, now she did it with her head high, knowing that dignity had won over arrogance, that grace had conquered cruelty. Her phone buzzed with a text from Terrence. Watching the news. You're my hero, sis. She smiled, typing back. Just did my job. The same one he called me stupid for doing. No, came his immediate response. You did so much more than that. The aftermath of Alexander Crawford's public meltdown at the Waldorf Astoria played out like a Shakespearean tragedy performed on every screen in America. The ballroom stood frozen in the immediate wake of Thomas Bradley's announcement. Alexander remained on stage, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that might have been fear if anyone thought Alexander Crawford capable of such an emotion. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every twitch of his jaw, every clench of his manicured fists. "You can't do this," Alexander said, his voice carrying through the wireless mic he still wore. "I built this company. I am Crawford Industries. The board will convene tomorrow morning," Bradley replied, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Until then, security will escort you from the premises." "Security?" Alexander laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "You're having security escort me from my own event?" "It's the company's event," Bradley corrected, "and you're no longer representing the company's interests." Two security guards approached the stage, their faces professionally neutral. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a corridor of shame. Phones rose like salutes, recording every step of Alexander's descent from the stage. "This is about her, isn't it?" Alexander suddenly turned, scanning the room with wild eyes. "Where is she? Where's that waitress? She did this. She planned this." "Mr. Crawford, please come with us," one security guard said quietly. "Don't touch me." Alexander jerked away. "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what I could do to you?" "Sir, please don't make this harder than necessary." The live streams were already trending. Hashtag Crawford collapse. Hashtag Billionaire breakdown. Hashtag Naomi deserves better. Comments flooded in faster than anyone could read them. The mighty Alexander Crawford, reduced to being escorted out like a common troublemaker. From the kitchen entrance, Naomi watched it all unfold on Marcus's phone. The staff had gathered around, their dessert service forgotten as they witnessed history in the making. "He's looking for you," Carla whispered. "He actually thinks you orchestrated this." "As if I have that kind of power," Naomi said softly. But even as she said it, she realized she did have power, just not the kind Alexander understood. She had the power of truth, of dignity, of being the mirror that reflected his ugliness back at him. Jennifer, Alexander's assistant, appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face streaked with tears. "Ms. Brooks, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to apologize. For everything. For all the times I had to deliver his cruel messages, for standing by, while he... I'm so sorry. You were doing your job," Naomi said gently. "Just like I was. No, it's different. I had choices. I had power to push back, and I didn't. I was a coward." Jennifer pulled out her phone, showing a folder full of recordings. "But maybe I can make up for it now. 3 years of recordings. Every abusive tirade, every discriminatory comment, every threat. I recorded them all, thinking someday, someone would care enough to listen." The kitchen fell silent. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was about a pattern, a culture, years of unchecked cruelty. "Why now?" Naomi asked. "Because you stood up when I couldn't. Because you showed me that dignity matters more than a paycheck. Because someone needs to stop him before he destroys more lives." Meanwhile, Alexander was being driven away from the Waldorf in the back of a town car, his phone exploding with notifications. His social media manager had quit via text. His publicist wasn't answering calls. His lawyer was the only one who picked up. "Steve, I need you to destroy that waitress." Alexander snarled into the phone. "Sue her for defamation, interference with business. I don't care what. Just bury her." "Alex, I'm watching the footage. You can't sue someone for existing while you self-destruct. My advice, stay quiet, stay off social media, and let me try to salvage what's left." "What's left?" "It's a minor setback. The board will come to their senses. They need me." "Alex, Crawford Industries stock has dropped 12% in after-hours trading. 3 major clients have announced they're reviewing their contracts. The EEOC is opening an investigation based on multiple complaints. This isn't minor." Alexander hung up, staring out at the city lights. Each building represented power, money, influence, things he'd thought were permanent, unchangeable. Like his position, like his untouchability. His phone buzzed with a Google alert for his name. The headlines were brutal. "Crawford's crawl. Billionaire CEO melts down after losing billions from boardroom to boardroom. Crawford placed on leave, the waitress who toppled a titan. Naomi Brooks Grace under fire." The last one made him throw his phone against the car window. It didn't break the phone or the window, which somehow made him angrier. Back at Crawford Industries headquarters, an emergency board meeting was already underway via video conference. Board members from around the world had logged in, their faces grave on the conference room screen. The damage assessment? Bradley asked his team. Catastrophic, reported the CFO. We've lost 40% of market cap in 3 hours. Chin Industries and Alvarez Global have formally withdrawn. Patterson Equity, Kingston Capital, and 6 other major partners are suspending joint ventures pending review. Jesus Christ, muttered one board member. How did we let it get this bad? We all knew what he was like, said another, an elderly woman who'd been on the board since the company's founding. We chose to look away because the numbers were good. Well, now the numbers aren't good, and we can't look away anymore. I've been contacted by 17 former employees in the last hour, the head of legal reported. They're organizing a class action lawsuit. Hostile work environment, discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Jennifer Martinez, his assistant, has provided recordings spanning 3 years. The board exchanged glances. This was beyond damage control. This was survival. Motion to remove Alexander Crawford as CEO, effective immediately. Bradley said formally. Seconded. All in favor. Every hand rose. Motion carried. Draft the termination letter. Include the morality clause. His behavior has materially damaged the company's reputation and value. He'll fight it, legal warned. Let him. We have cause. We have evidence. We have a responsibility to our shareholders and employees. As the board deliberated his fate, Alexander sat in his penthouse apartment, watching his empire crumble on multiple screens. CNN was running a segment called The Fall of Crawford. Fox Business was discussing toxic leadership in the modern age. Even CNBC, usually friendly territory, was questioning his fitness to lead. His phone rang. His ex-wife. I'm taking full custody, she said without preamble. I won't have our children associated with this. Their classmates are already sharing the video, calling their father a monster. Patricia, you can't. I can and I will. My lawyer will be in touch. She hung up. Alexander stood in his empty penthouse, surrounded by millions of dollars of art and furniture, completely alone. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who had called Naomi nobody was discovering what it really meant to be nobody to everyone who mattered. The next morning brought no mercy for Alexander Crawford, but for Naomi Brooks, it brought something unexpected. Opportunity wrapped in responsibility she'd never sought. Terrence had stayed up all night, fielding calls and messages on Naomi's behalf. Their small apartment had become command central for something neither of them fully understood. Good Morning America wants you for an interview, he said, looking at his notes. So who does The View, CNN, and about 15 podcasts? There's also this. He held up his laptop, showing a GoFundMe that someone had started. Help Naomi finish her degree. It's already at $200,000. Naomi stared at the screen, speechless. I can't take that money. I didn't ask for it. You didn't ask for any of this, Terrence pointed out. But it's happening. The question is what you do with it. She thought about Alexander, probably in his penthouse, raging against the world. Then she thought about everyone who'd ever been called stupid, worthless, nobody by someone with power. The interview, she said finally. Just one. I'll do Good Morning America. But I want to make something clear. This isn't about revenge. It's about dignity. Meanwhile, Alexander was experiencing what it meant to be radioactive in Manhattan's elite circles. The University Club, where he'd been a member for 15 years, had suddenly found irregularities in his account. The charity boards he sat on were requesting his resignation to avoid distraction from their missions. Even his regular table at Daniel was mysteriously unavailable for the foreseeable future. But the killing blow came at 9 a.m. sharp, delivered by courier to his penthouse. His official termination from Crawford Industries. Effective immediately, your employment as CEO is terminated for cause under Section 7.3 of your employment agreement, moral turpitude. Your actions have brought substantial disrepute upon the company and materially damaged shareholder value. He didn't read the rest. Instead, he called his lawyer. Sue them all, he demanded. The board, the investors, that waitress, especially her. Alexander, listen to me very carefully, Steve replied. You have no case. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Jennifer Martinez has provided 3 years of recordings. 17 former employees have come forward with corroborating stories. The video of your meltdown has been viewed 50 million times. If you pursue this, you'll only make things worse. Worse? How could it possibly be worse? Discovery, for one. Everything would become public record. Every email, every text, every private moment of your professional life. Do you really want that level of scrutiny? Alexander hung up without answering. He turned on the television, seeking distraction, only to find Naomi's face on the screen. She sat across from Robin Roberts, wearing a simple blue dress, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She looked different from the waitress he'd humiliated, not in appearance, but in bearing. She sat straighter, spoke clearer, commanded the space in a way that made his chest tighten with rage. Naomi, thank you for being here, Robin said warmly. How are you handling all of this attention? Honestly, it's overwhelming, Naomi replied. 3 days ago, I was just trying to get through my shift. Now I'm somehow a symbol for every person who's ever been mistreated at work. That's not a responsibility I take lightly. The video of Mr. Crawford calling you stupid has sparked a national conversation about workplace dignity and power dynamics. What would you say to him if he were watching right now? Naomi looked directly at the camera, and Alexander felt like she was looking straight at him. I'd say that power isn't about how many people you can diminish. It's about how many people you can elevate. I'd say that calling someone stupid doesn't make you smart. It just reveals your character. And I'd say that I hope he learns from this, though I'm not holding my breath. There's been a GoFundMe started to help you finish your degree, which I'm grateful for, but I want to redirect. I'm asking people to donate to a scholarship fund instead for service workers pursuing higher education. We're calling it the Dignity Through Education Fund. Because this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been told they're nobody while trying to be somebody. Alexander threw his remote at the screen. It bounced off harmlessly, but the gesture made him feel marginally better, until his phone rang with an unknown number. Mr. Crawford? This is Margaret Thompson from the EEOC. We need to schedule a deposition regarding multiple complaints. He hung up and immediately received another call. Mr. Crawford? Jack Harrison from the New York Times. We're running a feature on toxic leadership and would love your comment on allegations that you created a hostile work environment. He turned off his phone entirely, but the landline started ringing. Then the doorbell. Reporters had found his building. Across town, at Le Bernardine Elite, Naomi was back at work despite Richard Beaumont's offer of paid leave. I need normalcy, she told him. I need to remember who I am beyond all this noise. But normalcy was impossible. The restaurant was packed with customers who wanted to eat where it had happened. They asked for photos with her. They left enormous tips for the cause. One table of tech entrepreneurs even offered her a job on the spot. We need someone like you, they said. Someone who understands service, dignity, and grace under pressure. I appreciate the offer, Naomi replied, but I have a degree to finish first. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia Alvarez. Watching your interview. You continue to impress. The offer stands. When you're ready, we have a place for you. That evening, as Naomi was closing up the restaurant, she found Alexander waiting by her car. He looked different, disheveled, unshaven, his expensive suit wrinkled, the kind of disarray that money usually insulated against. Her hand moved to her phone, ready to call for help, but something in his posture stopped her. He looked defeated, hollow, like a man who'd lost more than money or position. Come to gloat? He asked, his voice rough. No, I came to go home after a long shift. You're my way. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've cost me? What I've done? Naomi's composure finally cracked. I serve you wine. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to call me stupid. You chose to treat people like disposable objects. I didn't cost you anything. You threw it all away yourself. I was correcting incompetence. You were being cruel because you could, because it made you feel powerful, because no one had ever told you no. She stepped closer, no longer the cowering waitress he remembered. But here's what you never understood. Respect isn't about position. The janitor who cleans your office deserves the same dignity as the investors you court. That's not weakness. That's humanity. Spare me the philosophy lesson from someone who couldn't even pour wine without stumbling. That's the thing, Mr. Crawford. I didn't stumble. I barely touched your shoulder, and you exploded. You revealed exactly who you are. A small man in an expensive suit, so insecure that the slightest perceived slight sends you into a rage. Alexander's face flushed. You think you've won? I still have resources you can't imagine. I'll rebuild. I'll come back stronger. And when I do, you'll what? Humiliate another waitress? Berate another employee? Build another empire on cruelty? Naomi shook her head. You haven't learned anything. And what have you learned? How to be a victim. How to profit from one moment of confrontation. I've learned that standing up to bullies isn't about bringing them down. It's about refusing to stay down yourself. I've learned that dignity is its own power. And I've learned that men like you always think you're irreplaceable until the world proves otherwise. A police car cruised by slowly, the officer inside noting the confrontation. Alexander saw it too and stepped back. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Naomi got in her car, then paused. I hope you learn what real strength looks like someday, Mr. Crawford. It's not about never falling. It's about how you choose to get back up. She drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot, a formerly powerful man reduced to making threats in the dark. That night, Alexander returned to his penthouse to find most of his household staff had quit. His personal chef, his housekeeper, his driver, all gone, unwilling to be associated with his toxicity. The resignation letters were variations on a theme. They could no longer work for someone who showed such contempt for service workers. He sat in his empty kitchen, trying to remember the last time he'd made his own meal. The refrigerator was full of ingredients he didn't know how to combine. The coffee maker might as well have been alien technology. He'd built his life on the labor of others while despising them for it. His phone, which he'd finally turned back on, showed 247 missed calls. None from anyone who mattered anymore. His ex-wife's lawyer, reporters, process servers, but not a single friend, because he'd never really had any. Just people who tolerated his behavior for access to his power. Meanwhile, Naomi sat at her kitchen table with Terrence, looking at acceptance letters that had suddenly appeared from multiple universities. Full scholarship to Columbia Business School. Terrence read, amazed. Harvard wants you for a special leadership program. Wharton is offering a fellowship. How is this possible? Naomi asked. My grades are good, but not that good. Your grades are fine, but your story is extraordinary, Terrence said. You become a case study in grace under pressure. Business schools want to understand what you have that Alexander Crawford didn't. Common decency? Exactly. And apparently, that's rarer in business than we thought. The doorbell rang. Terrence answered it to find a courier with an elegant envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Sophia Alvarez. Ms. Brooks, leadership isn't about titles or wealth. It's about inspiring others to be their best selves. In 10 seconds of dignity, you showed more leadership than Alexander Crawford did in 20 years of dominance. The world needs leaders like you. When you're ready, we're ready. S. Alvarez. Attached was a formal offer, full scholarship to any business school of her choice, plus a guaranteed position at Alvarez Global upon graduation, with a signing bonus that would pay off any existing debts and set up Terrence for the rest of medical school. Naomi read it 3 times, then looked at her brother. Is this real? As real as a billionaire calling you stupid for doing your job. Except this time, good things are happening to good people. Across the city, Alexander Crawford sat alone in his penthouse, watching his name trend worldwide for all the wrong reasons. Hashtag Crawford consequences. Hashtag power without purpose. Hashtag dignity wins. Tomorrow would bring more lawsuits, more revelations, more consequences. But tonight he was learning what it truly meant to be nobody, not in position or wealth, but in character, in connection, in the things that actually made someone somebody. The irony was perfect and bitter. The waitress he'd called nobody was becoming somebody, while the somebody he'd thought himself to be was discovering he'd been nobody all along. 6 weeks had passed since the Waldorf Astoria incident, and Alexander Crawford's descent from titan to pariah was nearly complete. The man who once commanded boardrooms now sat in a sterile conference room, facing a panel of EOC investigators while his lawyer, one of the few still willing to represent him, sat beside him, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Crawford," Margaret Thompson said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "We've received testimony from 43 former employees. Would you like to respond to Andrea Mitchell's claim that you threw a laptop at her when she suggested implementing diversity training?" "I don't recall that specific incident," Alexander said through gritted teeth. "What about Marcus Thompson's statement that you referred to him using racial slurs when he questioned your strategy? Taken out of context. Or Sarah Chen's recording where you explicitly state that you don't hire women of birthing age because they're investments with diminishing returns?" Steve, his lawyer, placed a hand on Alexander's arm. "My client exercises his Fifth Amendment rights." Margaret Thompson smiled coldly. "That's his right. But silence in civil proceedings can be used as an admission of guilt. We're recommending the maximum penalties, $15 million in fines, mandatory reformation of all Crawford Industries policies, and a permanent ban on Mr. Crawford holding any executive position in a publicly traded company." Alexander's face went white. "You can't. We can. We are. And Mr. Crawford, this is just the beginning. The FBI is investigating potential fraud charges. The IRS is auditing your last 10 years of returns. And the class action lawsuit has grown to include over 200 plaintiffs." As Alexander was experiencing his legal reckoning, Naomi Brooks stood in front of a very different panel, the admissions committee at Columbia Business School. She'd chosen Columbia not just for its prestige, but because it meant she could stay close to Terrence while he finished medical school. "Ms. Brooks," the dean said, leaning forward, "your application is unusual. Your grades are solid, but not exceptional. Your GMAT scores are good, but not outstanding. Yet you have recommendation letters from some of the most powerful business leaders in the world. Can you explain what they see in you?" Naomi took a breath, thinking of all the ways she could answer. She could talk about the incident, about standing up to power, about becoming a symbol. Instead, she said something simpler. They see someone who understands that business isn't just about numbers. It's about people. Every transaction, every deal, every decision affects real humans with real lives. I learned that carrying trays in a restaurant. I learned it watching how a single moment of cruelty can destroy decades of building. I learned it seeing how dignity and grace can be more powerful than any hostile takeover. And what do you plan to do with an MBA? Build something better. Companies that treat every employee, from the C-suite to the custodial staff, with equal respect. Businesses that understand that profit without purpose is just greed with a spreadsheet. The committee exchanged glances. The dean smiled. "Welcome to Columbia, Ms. Brooks. We think you'll teach us as much as we teach you." That afternoon, Naomi returned to Loop Bernardine Elite for what would be her last shift. Richard Beaumont had offered to let her stay on as a consultant, but she knew it was time to move forward. The restaurant had changed since the incident. There was now a prominent sign stating their commitment to treating all staff with dignity and respect. Employee complaints were taken seriously. The culture had shifted from one of silent endurance to one of mutual respect. "I can't believe you're leaving us," Carla said, hugging her tight. "This place won't be the same. You'll be fine. Better than fine. You're the new assistant manager, remember?" Marcus approached with a gift from the staff, a leather briefcase with her initials embossed in gold. "For the future CEO," he said with a grin. As Naomi was celebrating with her colleagues, Alexander Crawford was experiencing betrayal from within his own family. His brother, Robert, had called an emergency meeting at a downtown law office. "I'm buying you out," Robert announced without preamble. "Your shares in the family trust, your position on the foundation board, everything. You can't force me out of our father's legacy," Alexander snarled. "I can when your actions threaten to destroy that legacy. Dad built this fortune on respect and hard work. You've turned it into a monument to your own ego." The trustees voted unanimously. Take the buyout or we'll freeze your assets during what will be a very public, very ugly legal battle. My own brother, your own brother who's watched you become everything Dad taught us not to be. He was a janitor before he was a millionaire, Alex. He never forgot that. You forgot it the moment you put on your first designer suit. The buyout papers were generous. $50 million, enough for anyone to live comfortably forever. But for Alexander, who measured his worth in billions, it was poverty. This is because of her, Alexander said. That waitress poisoned everyone against me. No, Alex. You poisoned yourself. She just refused to swallow it. Meanwhile, the transformation of Naomi Brooks from waitress to business school student to sought-after speaker was happening at breakneck speed. Requests poured in from companies wanting her to speak about leadership, dignity, and corporate culture. She accepted few, focusing on her studies, but the ones she did became legendary. At a Fortune 500 conference, she stood before an audience of CEOs and delivered a speech that would be quoted in business schools for years to come. Alexander Crawford once asked what I had built, implying that because I was a waitress, I had built nothing. But every day, in restaurants across America, servers build experiences. We build moments of joy for celebrations, comfort for hard days, connections between humans. We do it while standing for hours, memorizing complex orders, managing difficult personalities, and maintaining smiles through it all. That's not nothing. That's everything. It's the foundation of service, of business, of human interaction. The tragedy of Alexander Crawford wasn't that he was cruel to a waitress. It was that he never understood that every empire is built on the shoulders of people doing allegedly simple work. Ignore them, dismiss them, demean them, and eventually, your empire has no foundation left. The audience rose in a standing ovation. In his apartment, watching on a business channel he still obsessively monitored, Alexander threw another remote at another screen. He was running out of remotes. The lawsuit announcements came like dominoes. First, the class action was certified with 347 plaintiffs seeking combined damages of over $200 million. Then came the individual suits, wrongful termination, emotional distress, defamation. Jennifer Martinez's suit alone sought $10 million, backed by her 3 years of recordings. Alexander's legal team, what was left of it, gathered in his apartment for a strategy meeting. We need to settle, Steve said bluntly. All of them. Now, before discovery makes things worse. I don't settle. I win. Not this time. The evidence is overwhelming. The recordings are clear. The video is viral poison. Every jury in America has seen you call that woman stupid. You're the villain in this story, and villains don't win in court. Then find a way to make me the hero. Steve looked at him with something approaching pity. There is no version of this where you're the hero, Alex. The best we can hope for is limiting the damage. Settlement negotiations, NDAs where possible, and you disappear for a while. Maybe forever. Disappear? I am Alexander Crawford. No, you were Alexander Crawford. Now your cautionary tale. 1 year later, the Columbia Business School auditorium was packed for a special guest lecture. Naomi Brooks, now in her second year of MBA studies and already considered one of the most promising students in the program's history, was introducing a speaker for the Leadership in Crisis series. Today's speaker has experienced both the heights of success and the depths of failure. She began, her voice carrying the same quiet strength that had captivated a nation. He's here to share what he's learned about the cost of cruelty and the price of arrogance. Please welcome Mr. Robert Crawford. Alexander's brother took the stage, his bearing much humbler than his brother's had ever been. He looked at Naomi with genuine respect before addressing the audience. My brother Alexander once called Ms. Brooks stupid. That moment, that word, began the unraveling of everything he'd built. But it wasn't the word that destroyed him. It was the worldview behind it, the belief that wealth and position made him superior to those who served him. Today, Alexander Crawford is worth less than the woman he tried to humiliate, not just financially, but in every measure that actually matters. The students took notes, recorded, absorbed this lesson in corporate hubris. In the back row, unrecognized in a baseball cap and sunglasses, Alexander Crawford sat listening to his brother catalog his failures. He'd snuck in, desperate to see what had become of the waitress who destroyed his life, though even he was beginning to understand that he'd destroyed it himself. Naomi had changed. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by centered confidence. She commanded the room not through intimidation, but through presence. When she spoke, people leaned in. When she smiled, it was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way that made others want to smile back. "Mr. Crawford," a student asked Robert, "what happened to your brother? Where is he now?" "Living in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens, last I heard. The lawsuits took most of his remaining wealth. The reputation made him unemployable. He sent out resumes under fake names, but background checks always revealed the truth. The man who wouldn't hire anyone he deemed beneath him now can't get hired anywhere himself." Alexander pulled his cap lower, his jaw clenching. But he stayed, compelled by something he couldn't name. After the lecture, Naomi was surrounded by students and faculty, all wanting her perspective on leadership, on grace, on building businesses that elevated rather than exploited. She handled each question thoughtfully, never rushed, giving each person the attention they deserved, the same attention Alexander had never given anyone he deemed unimportant. As the crowd thinned, she noticed him. Even with the disguise, she recognized the posture, the way he held himself apart from others. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither moved. Then Naomi excused herself from the remaining students and walked over. "Mr. Crawford, Ms. Brooks." His voice was rough and used to speaking without commands. Or should I say, soon-to-be MBA. "Naomi is fine." They stood in awkward silence. Up close, she could see how much he'd aged in a year. Lines creased his face, his hair had gone completely gray, and there was something hollow in his eyes, the look of a man who'd lost everything and couldn't understand why. "I came to—" He started, then stopped. What did he come for? To confront her? To blame her one more time? Looking at her now, successful, respected, surrounded by people who genuinely admired her, he couldn't summon the old rage. "I don't know why I came." "I do," Naomi said simply. "You're trying to understand how the world changed while you stayed the same. The world didn't change. You changed it. You, in your viral moment. No, Mr. Crawford, the world was always this way. You just lived in a bubble where cruelty was rewarded and kindness was seen as weakness. That bubble popped, and now you're in the real world with the rest of us." "The rest of you?" He laughed bitterly. "I had everything. Power, money, influence." "You had nothing," Naomi interrupted gently. "You had possessions and positions, but nothing real. No genuine relationships, no true respect, no lasting legacy except as an example of how not to lead. And you? What do you have? A brother who loves me, friends who support me, mentors who believe in me, a future I'm building with my own hands, and the knowledge that I've never made anyone feel worthless for serving me coffee or cleaning my office." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "I've applied to over 200 jobs. Even fast food places won't hire me. They all know who I am. What I did. What you did to yourself," Naomi corrected. "I was just the catalyst, not the cause." "I could have handled it differently," he admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. "That day in the restaurant, I could have just let it go. You could have, but you didn't. And that choice revealed who you really were." "Who I am," he corrected. Present tense. "This is who I am now. Nothing." "No," Naomi said firmly. "You're someone with a choice. You can stay bitter, keep blaming others, keeping the victim in your own story. Or you can learn, grow, become someone different, someone better. It's too late for that. It's never too late to choose dignity over destruction. I know a community center in the Bronx that needs volunteers. No glory, no recognition, just serving food to people who need it. The director is my aunt. She doesn't care who you were, only who you choose to be now." She wrote down an address on a piece of paper, handed it to him. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings. They especially need help cleaning up after service." Cleaning. Alexander's old instincts flared. "You want me to clean? I want you to serve." to understand what it means to give without getting, to be useful without being powerful, to matter without being important. She turned to leave, then paused. You asked what I have that you don't? I have the ability to see everyone as equally human. The janitor, the CEO, the student, the teacher, all equally deserving of respect. Until you learn that, you'll always be poor, no matter how much money you have or don't have. 2 weeks later, at the community center in the Bronx, Naomi's Aunt Rosa was supervising dinner service when a man in expensive but worn clothing walked in hesitantly. "I'm here to volunteer," Alexander said, the words foreign in his mouth. Rosa looked him up and down. "You're him, the one who called my niece stupid." "Yes. And now you want to volunteer here?" she said. "Naomi said you needed help." Rosa studied him for a long moment. "Bathrooms need cleaning. Supplies are in that closet. Dinner's at 6. Volunteers eat with everyone else. No special treatment." Alexander looked at the mop and bucket, at the industrial cleaning supplies, at the bathroom door beyond. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to maintain what little dignity he had left. But dignity, he was beginning to understand, wasn't about being above certain tasks. It was about how you performed them. He picked up the mop. 6 months later, Naomi graduated from Columbia with honors. The ceremony was packed, with Sophia Alvarez, James Chun, and dozens of other business leaders there specifically to see her walk across the stage. Terrence sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face as his sister achieved what had once seemed impossible. In her graduation speech as class valedictorian, Naomi spoke about service. "We're entering a world of business that often forgets its fundamental purpose, to serve. Not just shareholders, but stakeholders. Not just customers, but communities. Not just profits, but people." I learned this not in a classroom, but in a restaurant, carrying trays and managing difficult customers. Every person in this room will have power. The question is, will you use it to elevate or to humiliate, to build or to bully, to serve or to be served? The applause was thunderous. Job offers poured in from every direction, but Naomi had already made her choice. She was starting her own consulting firm, Dignity Dynamics, helping companies build cultures of respect and mutual elevation. Her first client was Alvarez Global. Her second was the restructured Crawford Industries, now under Robert's leadership. A year later, at the grand opening of Dignity Dynamics' first official office, the guest list included former waiters and current CEOs, students and teachers, all mingling as equals. Naomi stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. 3 years ago, a man called me stupid for accidentally brushing his shoulder. That moment could have broken me. Instead, it taught me that true power isn't about putting others down. It's about lifting them up. Today, we launch a company built on that principle. In the back of the room, unnoticed by most, Alexander Crawford stood in a janitor's uniform. He'd finally found work, cleaning offices at night. He watched Naomi command the room with the kind of natural authority he'd only ever achieved through fear. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. He nodded back, then quietly returned to his work, understanding finally what real service meant. The evening ended with Naomi writing in her journal, the same one she'd kept throughout her journey. "He called me stupid. The word was meant to diminish me, to reduce me to nothing. Instead, it became the catalyst for discovering who I really was. Not a waitress who became a CEO, but a human who refused to let another human make her feel less than human." Alexander Crawford lost everything not because he was cruel to me, but because cruelty was all he had. When that was stripped away, there was nothing left. I built my life on dignity, patience, and truth. He built his on fear, intimidation, and lies. In the end, the strongest foundation won. He called me stupid, but dignity, patience, and truth turned out to be the sharpest weapons of all. She closed the journal and looked out at the New York skyline, the same lights Alexander had once commanded now reflecting a different kind of power. Not the power to destroy, but the power to build. Not the power to humiliate, but the power to elevate. Somewhere in Queens, Alexander Crawford finished his shift cleaning offices, including one that belonged to a company that had once been a client. The nameplate on the CEO's door caught his eye. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. He thought of Naomi, of the restaurant, of that moment when he could have chosen differently. The moment was gone, but the lesson remained. He pulled out the worn piece of paper with the community center's address, a reminder of the first step toward becoming someone different, someone who understood that serving others wasn't beneath him. It was the only way to rise above what he'd been. The city hummed with its usual energy, indifferent to the rise and fall of titans. But in boardrooms and break rooms across Manhattan, the story was already becoming legend. The waitress who toppled so, not with revenge, but with grace, not with hatred, but with dignity, not with violence, but with the simple act of refusing to be broken by someone who mistook cruelty for strength. Alexander Crawford had called her stupid. The word had echoed across the restaurant, across the internet, across the world. But in the end, it was just a word spoken by a man who never understood that true intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about understanding that everyone has something to teach you, especially those you serve and those who serve you. So here's the question that haunts this story. How many times have we witnessed someone being humiliated and stayed silent, choosing comfort over courage? And what does that silence cost us all? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge us to choose dignity over indifference.